The person who felt like your soulmate was studying you, not loving you, studying you. Every question they asked, every silence they filled with the perfect response, every uncanny coincidence that made your chest tighten with disbelief, all of it was information being gathered while you thought you were finally being seen. And the reason this realization hits so hard is because your nervous system already suspects it. Something inside you has been quietly whispering that the connection was too fast, too smooth, too tailored, too intoxicating to be real. And you have been arguing with that inner voice ever since the confusion began. What you are about to understand will not just explain the relationship, it will explain why leaving felt like grieving a version of yourself that never actually existed. Before we go any deeper into this, take a breath and consider subscribing, because what we uncover here together is not just information, it is emotional reorientation. This channel exists for the ones who trusted with their whole heart and were left holding the wreckage of a story they thought was written in the stars. If you stay with me, you will not only learn how manipulation works, you will begin to feel your clarity return, slowly, honestly, and permanently. Subscribing is a small gesture, but it is also a quiet promise to yourself that you will no longer accept illusions as intimacy. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from realizing someone did not fall in love with you. They constructed a version of themselves that matched everything you had been silently longing for. That construction did not happen by accident. Narcissistic individuals possess a heightened perceptual ability that is often mistaken for emotional depth. They read micro expressions, tonal shifts, hesitations, longings, unspoken wounds, and unresolved family dynamics with a speed most emotionally healthy people never develop, because emotionally healthy people are too busy actually feeling to constantly analyze. This is not intuition rooted in empathy. It is calibration rooted in strategy. They are not tuning into you to connect. They are tuning into you to reflect. And that reflection is what your psyche interprets as recognition. Human beings are wired to bond with those who mirror us, because in early attachment, mirroring is how an infant learns it exists. When someone in adulthood suddenly reflects your inner world back to you with astonishing accuracy, your brain does not calmly categorize it as compatibility. It floods your system with dopamine, oxytocin, and a strange feeling of homecoming, as though a missing piece has finally arrived. What actually arrived was a mirror shaped like a person, and the reason it felt like destiny is because destiny and manufactured familiarity produce nearly identical neurochemical signatures. This is why victims often say they knew within days, sometimes hours, that they had met the one. That certainty was not intuition. That certainty was the byproduct of being agreed with on everything that had ever hurt you, being understood in ways you had given up hoping for, and being handed a future vision so perfectly aligned with your private dreams that skepticism felt like betrayal. The narcissist did not guess these things. You told them, sometimes without words. They watched what made your eyes soften, what made your voice drop, what topics you returned to when the wine loosened your guard, and they built themselves accordingly. The overwhelming affection that follows serves a specific neurological function. When affection is delivered in massive, uninterrupted doses early in a relationship, the brain does not have time to complete its natural evaluation cycles. Healthy attachment requires a slow oscillation between closeness and reflection, connection and individual processing, presence and healthy absence. Flooding a person with constant contact, elaborate declarations, rapid future planning, and unrelenting emotional intensity collapses that oscillation. There is no space to think because there is no space at all. The victim mistakes this suffocating closeness for depth, when in reality, depth requires room to breathe. And within that airless intimacy, something quietly dangerous is happening. Every vulnerability you share is being filed. Every fear you disclose becomes a future lever. Every wound you reveal becomes a map of where pressure can later be applied. You believe you are finally safe enough to be fully seen, and in a devastating irony, you are being seen more clearly than you have ever been seen in your life, but not for the purpose of love, for the purpose of leverage. This is why later, when the relationship turns, The criticisms will feel surgically precise. They will strike exactly where you are least offended because you handed over the blueprint yourself, believing you were building a home together. Genuine intimacy does not work this way. Real closeness is slow because trust is a biological process, not a decision. It requires repeated exposure to someone's behavior across different emotional weather, across disappointment, across disagreement, across boredom, across ordinariness. You cannot know someone in 3 weeks of euphoria. You can only know how they perform under ideal conditions, which tells you almost nothing about who they will be when conditions are not ideal. The narcissist relies on your unfamiliarity with this truth. They rely on the cultural mythology that overwhelming certainty is romantic. They rely on the fact that most people have never been taught the difference between chemistry and compatibility, between intensity and intimacy, between being wanted and being valued. Then, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere begins to change. It rarely arrives as an obvious cruelty. It arrives as a slight cooling, a comment that lands wrong, a withdrawal that has no explanation, a moment of coldness, followed by warmth so sudden you doubt whether the coldness ever happened. This inconsistency is not a malfunction of the relationship, it is the mechanism. The nervous system, having been trained on unbroken affection, now enters a state of alarm at the smallest shift, and that alarm produces something the previous stability could never produce, which is craving. You begin to chase the feeling you had at the beginning, not realizing that the beginning was the bait and the chase is the trap. This is where trauma bonding takes root, and it is one of the most misunderstood phenomena in relational psychology. A trauma bond is not weakness, it is not poor judgment. It is a neurochemical adaptation. When affection and pain come from the same source in unpredictable alternation, the brain produces an attachment far stronger than affection alone could ever create. Behavioral science has demonstrated for decades that intermittent reinforcement generates the most persistent behavior patterns, and the human heart is not exempt from this principle. The unpredictable return of warmth after coldness releases a relief so profound it feels like love, but it is actually the physiological reward of danger temporarily lifting. Underneath this, cognitive dissonance is quietly reshaping your inner world. You are holding two incompatible truths at once. This person is the love of your life. This person is hurting you. Because the mind cannot tolerate contradiction indefinitely, it begins to resolve the tension by rewriting reality. You start minimizing what happened. You start blaming yourself for reactions that were completely proportionate. You start editing your own memory to preserve the fantasy, because losing the fantasy feels like losing your identity. And in a sense, it is, because your identity has been slowly absorbed into the relationship without your awareness. This absorption is what specialists call identity erosion, and it is often invisible until you try to remember who you were before. Your opinions began aligning with theirs. Your interests began orbiting theirs. Your friendships thinned. Your instincts quieted. Your certainty about your own perceptions became something you had to negotiate for. Gaslighting does not always announce itself as a dramatic denial of reality. Often it is subtler, a sigh when you express a feeling, a look that suggests you are overreacting, a repeated framing of your emotional responses as instability. Over time, you stop trusting your inner signals, which is precisely the condition required for prolonged manipulation to continue undetected. And still, the soulmate belief survives. This is what confuses survivors the most, and what shame attaches itself to most fiercely. You knew something was wrong, and you stayed. You saw the pattern, and you still hoped. You recognized the manipulation, and you still ached for their return. Please hear this clearly. That was not stupidity. That was not desperation. That was your nervous system attempting to complete the story it had been chemically trained to expect. Your brain had been rewarded so intensely at the beginning that it kept searching for that reward. The way a person searches a familiar room for something they know they placed there, unable to accept that it was taken while they slept. If this is landing somewhere deep in you right now, I want to gently invite you to subscribe if you have not already, because the work of untangling this cannot be done in one sitting, and it should not be done alone. What we are building here is not a moment of insight. It is a long, careful reconstruction of your inner authority. Every video that reaches you at the right time is a small piece of that reconstruction, and I want to be here as you find your way back to yourself. There is a particular grief that accompanies this awakening, and it deserves to be named. You are not only grieving the person, you are grieving the version of them that never existed, which in many ways is harder, because there is nothing tangible to bury. You cannot mourn a real history because the history itself was partially fabricated. You are grieving the future you were promised, the shared life you visualized, the identity you were becoming inside that imagined life. This is why leaving a narcissistic relationship often feels more devastating than leaving a genuinely loving one. You are not just losing a partner, you are losing a story you had already begun to live inside. And here is what almost no one tells you. The intensity of the pain is not proof of the depth of the love, it is proof of the depth of the manipulation. Real love, when it ends, brings sorrow, but it does not typically produce the shattering disorientation of narcissistic loss. That disorientation is the signature of a bond formed through psychological pressure rather than mutual knowing. Understanding this distinction is not a way to diminish what you felt. It is a way to correctly locate the source of the pain so that healing can actually begin at the right layer. Healing begins in a quieter place than most people expect. It does not begin with hatred toward the person who hurt you. It begins with the slow return of self-trust. You start noticing your own reactions again without dismissing them. You start allowing your no to arrive without a paragraph of justification attached. You start recognizing the difference between the anxious pull towards someone and the settled draw towards someone. Anxiety mimics love because both involve activation, but they feel entirely different in the body once you learn to distinguish them. Love, when it is real, produces regulation. Manipulation, no matter how romantic it appears, produces dysregulation dressed as passion. You also begin to understand that the qualities you thought were rare in your former partner, the depth, the understanding, the emotional attunement, were not qualities at all. They were performances shaped by your own longings. The devastating and liberating truth is that everything you thought you found in them was actually already inside you, projected outward and reflected back in a form you could finally receive. When you reclaim that projection, you are not left empty. You are left whole for the first time. The capacity for depth was always yours. The empathy was always yours. The soulful presence was always yours. They did not bring it to you. They borrowed it from you and sold it back at the cost of your peace. Genuine intimacy, when you meet it, will feel almost anticlimactic at first, because your nervous system has been calibrated to associate love with intensity. Real love is not intense in the beginning. It is interested. It is curious. It is patient. It does not need to convince you. It does not stage grand declarations to secure your attachment. It shows up consistently, tolerates your imperfections without exploiting them, respects your pace, honors your boundaries without treating them as obstacles, and allows you to remain fully yourself throughout the process of becoming close. If this sounds less exciting than what you experienced before, that is not a flaw in real love. That is a symptom of how deeply your definition of love was distorted. Reclaiming your life after this kind of relationship is not about becoming hardened or suspicious. That would be another form of losing yourself, this time to fear. The goal is discernment, not defensiveness. You are not learning to close your heart. You are learning to open it in the presence of evidence rather than in the presence of performance. You are learning that trust is something people earn through time and behavior, not something they extract through charm and promises. You are learning that the fastest way to lose yourself is to hand your reality over to someone whose reality shifts depending on what they want from you. The moment you fully accept that the soulmate you believed in was a mirror, something extraordinary begins to happen. The obsession loosens, the longing quiets, the confusion clears. Not all at once, and not without waves of relapse, but steadily in the way daylight arrives, imperceptibly and then completely. You start to feel your own presence again in rooms where you used to feel only their absence. You start to hear your own thoughts without their voice editing them. You start to reach for things simply because you want them, not because you are trying to prove something or earn something or heal something through another person's approval. And somewhere along that quiet return to yourself, you will realize that the person you were searching for at the beginning of that relationship, the one who would understand you completely, love you unconditionally, and never abandon you, was never going to arrive from outside. That person has been building inside you this entire time, forged in exactly the fire you thought was destroying you. The manipulation did not create your depth, it revealed it. The betrayal did not break your capacity for love, it refined it. The illusion did not steal your future, it cleared the ground for one that will actually be real. If you have made it this far, please consider subscribing, not as a favor to this channel, but as a commitment to the version of you that is finally waking up. Stay close to voices that tell you the truth without exploiting your pain. Stay close to insights that return you to yourself rather than binding you to another cycle. What you are building now, quietly, invisibly, is something no manipulator will ever be able to counterfeit again, because you will know the difference in your body before your mind even has time to explain it.